I do have a little intro for you. And by little, like, it's not little. Are you aware of all the accomplishments that you have in your life? I was trying desperately to shorten this, but
Oh
it's
man,
crazy.
this is hilarious because I was just working on worthiness with my therapist and just tapping it the fuck into me. And I was like, worthiness, worthiness. It's just, yeah, it's hilarious. It's
Yes.
great. It's perfect. I'm interested to see what you say. I don't know.
Well, keep in mind, I'm probably gonna leave some stuff out, so don't be mad, don't be offended. I tried to like
Don't worry.
shorten it and get your essence as a human. But well, with all that being said, I am super excited to welcome Arthur Davis to the pod. Um, Arthur is a two-time world champion gymnast and who made it to the final round of competition on the TV show America's Got Talent. He's also performed all over the world for Cirque du Soleil. Now he's a teacher of movement and acro, choreographing internationally award-winning routines. Arthur is also a healer and someone I've considered to be a spiritual guide and an amazing energy worker. He now offers virtual energy healing sessions online, which you can book through theartofbodyandsoul.com. Welcome, Arthur.
Thank you. That was so
Welcome.
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so honored to be here, and you guys have spoken so wonderfully right now about all this and just the opportunity. And when you were talking, Morgan, I was reminded of that saying that I don't know, a spiritual person said, if you need to say it, it needs to be heard. And if you need to put it out into the world, it's really important to do so because it really affects people. And I do see that. Like sometimes when I just put something out that I'm like, I don't know, but I just feel it. Even just one person, it will deeply affect sometimes, and that's worth it, you know?
It is
So,
worth it. I
so
love
great
that
job.
so much. Yeah, I love that because I feel like we live in a like I'm just gonna start because like we live in a place where in a society where like we're so catered to like one thing and in this kind of energy and like healing work so you don't think it's going to affect someone, but if it does affect one person, it's like that is worth it. And I forget that all the time. I mean, all the time. I'm like, should I post this? Should I not? Like, and Kevin, you posted something last night that really deeply affected me and that made me go onto this person's Instagram and look at all of the things that they had to say. And it really was a wonderful part of my night. And so you just never know who you're gonna hit. Yeah. So thanks for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a lot of times, like Morgan and I have talked about, like we keep doing this inward kind of conversation that's very constant. And with that, a lot of what comes out is that we feel kind of alone. Like a lot of
Mm.
what we talk about and think about almost seems like the reason why our connection is so magnetic is that it is kind of unusual, like the work we're doing and the things we talk about. And I think that's why I feel like that same magnetism towards you, Arthur. Like there's something kind of that I recognize that's a little bit different. And I think the hope, like Morgan said, is like we keep asking the question, like, is there anyone else out there? Like, is anyone else like us? And there are, and of course there are,
Mm-hmm.
is really the answer.
For sure there are. And I think one of the unique things about you two, and I share in this, is that there's this bravery and courage in the way that you live because you live with your from your passion and you invest your energy and your time into that. And there's a lot of risk that you take because of that. And I was just listening to like an Oprah podcast this morning while I was working out because, we all need multiple forms of upliftment every day. And
Yes.
someone was talking about how it's really important to, when you're living an abundant life, it's basically your state of being. So if you're feeling abundant, you are. And it doesn't matter what your
Mm.
circumstances are because they always change and it's always in flux, as we always know. but just that feeling space. And I think when you're living from your passion, when you're doing what you love, you are in that abundant space and you're living your best life in that moment, in those moments. So I feel that from you, Kevin, and I know, I'm sure I can tell Morgan is also living from that place. Even just the fact that you guys are doing this, I think that's great because you're already doing it. One of my exercises over the past weeks is I've been trying to think of, okay, if I had absolutely everything I wanted, if I had all the money, I had all of my projects that I wanted to going, what would I feel like and what would I live like? What would I be doing? What would I think about today? How would I be feeling in this moment? And just as an exercise, trying to do that over and over again as much as possible. Because number one, that'll manifest it. And number two, I'm already there then. And that's work though. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think like I just keep smiling because like I said, your resume, so to speak, is so undeniably impressive. And as I was writing it, I kind of was just alone, like looking at all this stuff and kind of smiling and laughing, like, wow, of course, leave it to fucking Morgan and I to like have this person where we could talk about like his experience with Cirque du Soleil or being on TV or being a world champion gymnast. And we're like, can we just talk about feelings?
Yeah, let's just talk about feelings and worthiness and courage and all of those things.
the best thing.
It is. It just, yeah.
Oh, go
sorry.
ahead.
For me, I just feel like when we were kind of like talking about how this is going to go, we're like, well, the whole point is that we're more alike than we are different. And even though we have different crafts and we're building on a different, we have different goals and dreams, we're still operating off of this same alignment of staying healthy in our mind, body, and soul. And it is a true practice that is honestly very, very hard. And I can see that you're on that path all the time. And I'm just really curious to hear more about it because I feel all the time that I'm falling off the path and coming back on. And I know that's gonna happen, but sometimes I just think to myself, I just want to just stay. I want to stay here in this abundant place and stay happy and not derail,
Oh my gosh, I feel that so much. I often look at balance, and maybe I should reframe this a little bit, but I look at balance in life as like walking on this like very pointed roof, just on the top of it, and you're just like walking along. It's like, I have it.
Yeah.
And then like, and I literally feel that way all the time. I mean, looking back into a journal entry like a couple weeks ago, I was writing like, oh, I really feel like this sense of like calm and steadiness in my life. I think everything I've been doing has been working. I've been really doing my breathing exercises, meditating. I have like this practice I do, and that's been really helping. And I've just been, I felt great. And then this last week, I kept waking up at 3 a.m, like with anxiety and just not being able to sleep. And like, I'm in this beautiful surrounding, and yet I feel so worthless at times, and like just wrestling with that and why that's happening. And I mean, I'm working through some past trauma stuff in therapy. I think that has a lot to do with it. But I'm also at kind of another transitional point, which we always feel like, and what you're talking about, Morgan, is like, I want to stay in that place. Same. I feel the same.
Yeah.
And but you just can't. And I think it helps you like appreciate, if you're aware of that all the time, it helps you just appreciate each moment more. And it's waves.
It is waves.
I'm trying so hard when the wave comes down here to just be like, oh, it's down here. That's cool.
Yeah,
really,
meet yourself in that place and say, hi, like, I love you also when you're here, and whatever you're going through, you're talking to yourself. I like to talk to my whatever age person that's coming out in those moments, because usually when I'm down, I'm like 16 or 17, or that age where I was really having a rough go of it. And like, I have to be like, hey, hi, we're 30 now. And I love you. I love that you're here, but we don't need to like have this journey right now. We can just kind of like move on and keep growing. But
I
in
love
that
that you
low,
say you
yeah.
love her. That's good.
Hmm.
That's so good. You're loving that part. It's more than just acceptance, it's actual loving. I think
Yeah,
that's an important thing.
it is. It's struggle. I still struggle with it, but sometimes she's real annoying. But at other times, mostly I just have to love her. Yeah, it's what I feel like we need to do more of ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
I wanted to add in this just because I think it's interesting and kind of important. It's something I did when Morgan and I started this project, just talking about like the history of our connection and how we know each other. And, Arthur, like if you want to add anything, totally feel free. But I was trying to figure out when I met you. It was like 4-ish years ago, I think, in San Diego, which is interesting that you're there today.
Mm.
And Arthur and I have maintained a pretty close relationship through the years. After that summer in San Diego, I came and visited you and the mountains like twice.
Hmm.
And I think the first time was a short stay kind of along my little road trip down the coast of California. And then another time was about a week. And, like I really cherish those memories because it was a lot of what, again, like Morgan and I talk about and what Morgan and I do together, which is like so many conversations and actions of self-care, like meditating together and like working out outside and hiking and doing our star charts and doing energy healing sessions. And that's something that, again, I keep repeating myself, like Morgan and I really connect on. So I thought that would be interesting to add, like just um, the depth of Arthur and I's connection, our friendship, and how we kind of
Yeah.
came to know each other.
Yeah, and it was so. I mean, it was a meeting where it could have very easily have just been like, "Oh, hey," and then never see each other again. But it did end up progressing, and I think I found a lot of lovely clarity throughout our connection, and also just really seeing you on your journey from, because at that point you're like, I want to live in California someday, and I want to just be
Mm,
doing my art someday, and
mm,
I want to like be in love someday with this like great person, and like literally you have all of those things.
yeah,
um, and that's
yeah,
inspiring.
yeah. Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate you remembering that for me because it's so easy to forget like all the things, all the stuff you're desperately trying to manifest for yourself, 5 years ago. How often do we really check in and acknowledge how much we've achieved and accomplished? It's yeah, thank you for that.
I saw a meme from someone yesterday that was like, I've done the self-depreciating thing online. I've joked about myself and my faults, but what I really want to do is be soft with myself and be proud of myself. That was kind of the essence of it,
Hmm.
and I was like, oh yeah, that's so lovely. And I don't know why what you just said reminded me of that, but I was like, I appreciate that today. I'm gonna really work on that. Like just be soft with myself and just appreciate myself. Be proud of what I have, what I am, who I am.
Yeah, I'm almost like a little like speechless in a way because I remember like 5 years ago saying I really want to move to California. And the fact that I'm here is actually really huge. And I don't think I ever took a moment to really think about how much this wasn't just a wake up one day and do it kind of thing. I really thought about it and wanted it for a long time. Um, yeah, so
Yeah, you're the king of manifesting. I was always saying to him, like, you know what you want, you trust that the universe is on your side all the time. And that's how you have what you want in front of you, or you know at some point it's gonna land and you're gonna get that thing, and you trust that process, however long it's gonna take, however short it's gonna take. I just think you are like very trusting in this universe, and it's inspiring to me. So I can only imagine how Kevin's gotten his inspiration from you, Arthur, and that like doing those things together, even just being in nature together, doing the energy work like outside in the mountains in California, which is like one of my favorite places in the whole world. I think we think a lot about our successes, our achievements, in a way that's kind of like, oh yeah, that was what happened. We don't really get a chance to like you said, like go back into time and really appreciate things that we've done. And for you, I'm curious because you've had such high highs, right? You've had these successes in your life, television to just Cirque du Soleil, just everything. And how do you manage those high highs, and do you have those low lows right after?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's
It's
waves
a,
for sure. And I mean, even when I was, so I found this sport, I've always loved just movement in general, but I found this sport that kind of combined everything I loved, which was gymnastics and dance. And
mm,
it's just this incredible, beautiful thing, and so, so hard. Um, and so every season that I was in it, I would get to like national championships, and then that was kind of the top for that season. And then we'd have like kind of a lull. And every time I would just be like, I would question, do I want to do this anymore? I kind of hate it right now. Like I would go through the same process, and it took about like 6 times for me to be like, oh, well, here it comes. Okay, I know it's going to come. And I would kind of expect it and then kind of
mhm.
partner with it more. Um,
Okay.
but it is funny that even after other things, like say the America's Got Talent thing, the second time around, it was just such a grueling and exhausting and amazing, exciting experience. I was so exhausted, I had to take like 2 months to do nothing. I just, and
Wow.
people were like, come on, you got to like capitalize on this stuff. And I was like, I can't, I just can't do it. Um, and it just took time to integrate. And I think if I would have maybe balance myself a little more in that process, it wouldn't have been so of a down after, but maybe I wouldn't have had such a crazy, intense, amazing experience. And so that is kind of the balance of it. And even
Right.
those moments, for us as artists who like to produce things, those times are just as valuable. And I can
Yeah.
say that, but I don't always feel it.
Well,
Mhm.
we're putting our all into that thing. So
Right.
all of our energy is going there. So it's just a matter of time where we're going to need to take that time completely off, where our energy is like not in that thing, even though people are like, keep doing this, like keep
Yeah.
posting about your experience, make sure that everyone knows that you are on America's Got Talent, like all of these
Hmm.
voices that are like coming at you, you're like, oh, like I'm capped. I'm emotionally capped and
Right.
physically. I mean, it's really interesting that you have this like physical art form where you have to really work at the physical and the mental really simultaneously.
Yeah, I love that about it. I mean, as I get older, it slightly shifts a little bit. Not that I'm not capable, but it just,
Mm,
I have more of an appreciation for the energetic element of it, and this in the kind of wide spiritual element, because really, I feel like everything's a school to learn. And, even through our process of creating, like you guys with painting and um, me with doing what I do with the visual art, it's like it's a process that I learn about myself and I learn about the world, and I interact with people and I touch people, they touch me. And so you can do it in so many different ways. And I have always loved that kind of visual, physical part to
mm,
it. It's just that now it's become even less physical, less about the physical and more about the energy behind it. And what comes from that and what the feeling is. And like when I work with people in the last like 5 or 6 years, I started to get really intentional about, okay, whenever I'm working with anyone, I want them to just be a better person from my even gazing at them, from the words that I use to any time I put my hand on them. I want it to be enlightening, healing, like very specific, intentional things. And it really changed the creation of things. It really changed my experience of it, and I think it changed the product too. Um, not that what I did before wasn't great, but it just became more holistic or something, more
Right.
full. Um,
Well, you
and
said the word intentional. I think that is
mhm,
a big word in that. There's a lot of intention that's going into those specific things. And because of that, that's going to change because it's, just one set intention. And people are going to feel that from you because that's where your energy is going. It's really so
exactly.
cool. Yeah.
And I wanted to point out when Kevin was talking about, and you were talking about his manifesting, an
Mm.
important element to that is the being able to listen to what you want to manifest. And that's really like the first step is being available to listening and paying attention. And even now, like for me, sometimes it's hard for me to understand what it is that I do want. And that's where it gets the most frustrating, talking about these lows is just like, well, I was so clear on what I wanted, this whole goal that I did for like 10 years, just training and
Mm.
training. And now I'm like, what do I want? And
Mm.
I also don't think it's bad to be in that place. I think that's really humbling, and a lot of great things can come out of that. So, it takes some courage and some clarity to sit until you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we're allowed to change our mind too, right? Like
Mm,
we change, and sometimes the things we want don't even end up turning out the way we expected or end up even being what we want, which I
Mhm.
guess is a good segue because there was something I've been dying to talk to someone about, and you are the person that's going to know the most about it. And it's come up a lot, like just sort of working with other artists and curating exhibitions, like, and we've hit on it a few times now in this conversation about even just you talking about being on TV and you really needing a 2 month break, and how people had like other expectations of you, like, oh, I thought you'd be doing X, Y, or Z. And um, so really what I've been curious about is place. And, um, so many artists I've met, obviously, especially young artists, feel this obligation or pull to be where other artists are, where opportunities are, like New York City and LA. They're sort of like art centers of the world, really. And every now and again, I've met artists that challenge that or question it. And those are really interesting conversations. Like I met an artist before, like probably a year and a half ago in Boston. I was helping him install a show, and he lived in a pretty remote location in New Mexico after living in New York City. And um, he just spoke about it with such joy and happiness. And the specifics of it, like I am able to have 4 times the size of a studio space that I could never afford in New York City. And I love the peace and quiet. I love being able to look at the stars, and my work's changed because of that. Now I'm making sculpture. I used to make paintings. And, talking about the positive changes that he allowed to happen by kind of challenging some of what's expected of us as creative people. And you, of all people, like, you're a world traveler, someone who's performed in every major city that you can probably think of, and you've lived in LA for a long time, but you made the conscious decision and choice to leave and move to a pretty remote location in the San Bernardino National Forest. And I am so curious as a creative person. I mean, maybe just to start, like, what made you make that decision to leave the city, and maybe what initially drew you to the mountains?
It was actually really situational. I didn't understand until I actually moved there how badly I had wanted that for
Mm.
years.
Mm.
So I lived in LA for about 10 years, and the last year I was like really exploring. I had a roommate at that time. He was a musician, and we actually like wrote a music album together. And like it was just this, I lived right right on Sunset Strip in West Hollywood, and I was living this like very bohemian slash interesting artistic LA life at that point. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I'm exploring, I'm doing this. But I wanted to keep training the people that I was training, and it was just so difficult in LA, number one. Which is fine if something's challenging, but it felt difficult in a way that's like pushing something up a hill constantly,
Mhm.
and that's different. And then also, I found myself going to the park, any green spot I could find in LA, like every day. And it was just what my first thing I wanted to do. And I kept like searching out more areas and I kept going farther and farther outside to try to find those areas. So I just basically contacted my old coach who is in Redlands area, which is like an hour east of LA. And I just said, you know, let me come visit. He had a new space there. And as soon as I got in there, I was like, oh, I could definitely train them in here, but then I'd have to live in the Inland Empire. And I didn't want that. So then I was like, well, if I did live here, what if I just search outside the city? And we just started driving up the mountain. And I happened to find this little town. And it almost seemed like it was definitely the universe because it was just that one day exploring, no decisions. I drove up, I found this cool little town. I parked and I parked right in front of a real estate office, like the only real estate office in town at that point. I was like, oh, it's a real estate office. Go to the door. This guy answers the door and he's like, oh, are you interested in looking at a place? My roommate and I at the time. And I said, I don't know yet. And he's like, I'm showing a place in 15 minutes. Like, come see it before they see it. And I was like, all right. We literally walked there. And his name was Gabriel, by the way, it makes more sense in a second. And this guy that opens the door is like a 97-year-old, this old guy, and he opens the door and he's like, he looks at us and he goes, "Hi, I'm God. Come on in." And I was like, "What?" So 2 weeks later, I was living there. It just kind of just unfolded like that, and
Wow.
it just sucked me in.
Hmm.
And I never, before that, I wasn't like, "Yeah, I want to leave LA." It just happened.
Yeah.
Very interesting. Um, And yes, I went through a little bit of worry about just what my art form what would happen to my art, but I never regretted leaving for 1 second. My heart has always been happy that I am where I am. And I think for you, Kevin, like, or for anyone, it doesn't matter where you go, especially in today's world. Like, we're so connected virtually, and the world is so small and connected in many ways. Um, Also, like, how often do you actually go out to museums? And can it be something that you drive to an hour? Because I do. If I want to go to some LA event, I just go. But
Mhm.
it takes a little bit more planning, you know, but I am surrounded by what I love every single day. And I get to do things like this, which I can be anywhere for.
Mhm.
Um, and I think the most important thing is what my being is feeling like in my space. So because my heart felt like it wanted to be in nature, I'm able to create more freely and kind of see more opportunities because I'm in that feeling place.
Right.
That's a long answer, but
I just love how you described that whole journey for you because it sounds like your body was just like kind of slowly telling you. It was like you were being pulled and I just love that vision of like you kind of slowly getting to know yourself and what you needed and then somehow you landed in this spot and this guy was there and there's a Gabriel and there's a God and everything just came together and it was like the best thing you possibly could have needed. And I think that's just like how things end up when you lead with this, um, your heart. That's like the perfect story of how things just fall into place.
you're so right.
Yeah.
And you know, I find that I have a similar relationship with any project that really is that has power behind it if it needs to happen. And I feel like the opportunity will show up, and sometimes it's even very little and very small. And then I'll just like touch it or reach into it a little bit, and then it literally just like grabs me and pulls me in.
Mm,
And so with, you know, like America's Got Talent, that came from like just like a phone call and it started happening. It doesn't mean that it doesn't take effort, but it doesn't feel like that pushing, you know? And so now when I'm waiting, I wait a lot for like, okay, what is it? And I do a lot of exploring in that waiting process
Mhm.
because why not? How am I going to spend my time? So like, okay, explore, explore, explore. And then, oh, something pulls me, or two things pull me at the same time. And oh, great, great, I can do both. Um, and life is like this continuous, especially when I look at it that way, I think it manifests itself for me that way. I just like things to be interesting and have good stories to them and like be delightful. So I always intend that realizations come to me that way. Um, so yeah,
Well,
it did.
it's the storybook of our lives, and we get to be the writer of that. And if we want to have this
Well said.
delightful, awesome story, we get to choose that. And it's so fun to talk to you. I just want to talk to you all day long.
We
This
can do
is
it
so much
again.
fun. I know.
Can I ask you, really specific, like, of course, before we signed on to do this, I didn't give Arthur like super specific questions, but I kind of told him that I wanted to talk about this for some selfish reasons, because I'm a person that sees myself living a similar way that Arthur does, but also just meeting so many other artists who are thinking about a similar way of life. And I want to talk about the realities of it. And, so I have questions about like maybe what changed for you about specifically what you were working on creatively. And it could be like good changes or bad changes. Like, how did you make the adjustment and how did your work change, if at all?
Yeah, it definitely, I was intentional about not wanting to travel as much because I have lots of choreography clients for this acrobatic discipline all over the country. And I just was tired of traveling so much. Now it's the opposite because of COVID, of course, but um,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to kind of ground myself in a place and set down roots. And I just went and rented a place. So it wasn't like now I own a place up there, but I rented a place so I had more of a schedule right away. Like
Yeah.
I started training this group. I started just kind of making these little structural changes. And it was an adjustment. Like sometimes it was a little uncomfortable to know before it's like, oh, if I want to take a 2 months work, then I can, and then I'll just take this month off. This time when I got there, it was more like, oh, I'm training this group of people. These people are depending on me on a weekly basis. So if I
Mm,
do want to take time off, it has to be scheduled in the future. And like that kind of responsibility always feels scary to me. But I discovered such a love, even more of a love for teaching. And I think that that's the relationship that really started to kind of show itself to me was that kind of interpersonal relationship part. Now, since that time, there's been even more changes, of course, because with COVID, I was actually dating someone at the time and living there, and we saw only each other for 6 months. Then we ended up breaking up, which was a good thing. And I spent tons of time just alone and discovering myself and taking these explorative online classes and like drawing and painting and writing and like, and so it's kind of the opposite of this collaborative relationship with other people, and it's more of like a collaborative relationship with myself. So there's all these different things. I don't know that these different ways that it manifests itself, and I always tend to think, oh, this is it. I found it, and I'm doing it. Yes, but I'm doing it for now, and then something else comes. So
yeah.
um, my commute was definitely different. I I was driving like 30 minutes one way, but I have this sweeping, you've been there, beautiful drive down the mountain with no
Yeah.
traffic, and then on
It's,
the way back up. And like I had to adjust to that, but I loved that. And
yeah.
um, yeah, it's quiet. I mean, LA is noisy. I didn't realize how much I would barricade myself to like handle all the noise and energy. And, in my place, the windows are always open and it's just
Yeah.
so much silence and nature. And that would took some getting used to.
It's, yeah, I wanted to ask about that because sometimes there is a comfort in knowing maybe you're not socializing with anyone, or maybe nobody's even in your home. But I think some people would recognize that there's a comfort in knowing that you have like 10 neighbors and you can walk out the street and there's like 10 coffee shops and a grocery store. And that's not the case for you anymore. Was there any response, like good or bad, to that kind of realization that, wow, this is a totally different noise level and um, way of being in the world, where that, like, of course you have neighbors, but it's not the same as LA.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just a relief.
Yeah.
I think I didn't give myself enough space and time before. I also think age has something to do with it. Like when I hit 40, something like my energy level just shifted and I needed more serenity on a regular basis in order to produce. Like I still have tons of energy. I love being with people, and I have to balance that more with that time, that quiet time and that solitude. And so I think, with the sheer volume of people that especially moved into LA, I've lived up in the mountain 5 years now. So like the last 4 years I was there, and people were coming from New York and San Francisco because of the housing and like,
Yeah.
cost up there. And it was just so many people that I didn't realize how overwhelmed I was. So it actually was just a relief. I didn't struggle with it um, at all, like zero.
You make your own coffee now. You don't have to go and get it.
You said the wisest thing. Yes, exactly.
I'm sure that is a relief. I mean, I kind of did the same, little tiny bit different, but I did the same move from like a city living right downtown to somewhere to then living a little bit more remotely in the woods. And there's also ocean really close nearby. And I do have a coffee place like right down the street. But I remember the moments where like my morning ritual became so important to me when I became in this like really solitude, quiet place where just waking up, I was excited to just be. And I need to like feel like, oh, I gotta go to this coffee shop, get a coffee and see like 10 people I know and like stay there and have a conversation. It's like, oh no, I get to just be and have this beautiful ritual with like matcha or coffee or whatever it is I'm making. And it's like those little moments really are so happy. And
Oh my gosh, yes.
right, it's like so crazy how those tiny little things become a part of us so deeply. So yeah, I love listening to the changes that you went through.
And almost as enjoyable as the big moments, just in a slightly
Mm,
different way.
yeah.
And like I like my morning coffee time, you're describing the perfect thing because I go out on my deck and I just sit there and I look at the birds and the trees and the clouds or whatever's happening. And it's the most enjoyable time. And I just look forward to that time so much, and it fills me and it just sets the tone for the rest of my day. I mean, it doesn't happen every single day, but mostly. And I just value it as much as any of these other experiences. And
Hmm.
I think if there are moments that are uncomfortable, because there certainly are, especially, I went through a breakup. And so there was times where I felt very lonely in that like, post relationship kind of
Right.
feeling way.
Yeah.
You both are like so self-aware at this point, or at least, you know, you have intentional journeys that you're on and intentional structures that you provide yourself, that you could encompass that and you could sit with that and you could learn from that. So I don't think I mean, like for you specifically, Kevin, asking me like, maybe there's some sort of fear behind that, like, what if I'm just like, I can't. Well, you can always change it. And I also think
Mm,
you would sit with that for a minute and you would embrace it and you would look at it
Yeah.
and you might create from it.
What's kind of funny? Like, part of the questions I have, yeah, are sort of with myself in mind, and some are more like trying to help others. This particular one, if there's any fear with me, it's actually the opposite of what you're talking about. I think there's a little fear that, like, I would love it so too much and I wouldn't leave. That's a fear of mine. I don't really have a fear of it being uncomfortable.
Well, let me ask you, how are you with, so if there is something in your life ever, which I'm sure there is at points, that seems to be not great for you or pulls you a little off of your balance or kind of doesn't align with your higher self, how good are you at seeing that and addressing it?
Comes and goes. I think like a big thing we've been talking about is really listening, and that's a skill. Like listening to who you are, what you want. That's like the whole point of this conversation is like, who are you? What do you want? Like, cut out all the obligations and pressure of what's expected of you as an artist and a creative person to keep up, to show up, to be seen, and check in with yourself about what actually fuels you. And I've always gotten a clear message that that's where I belong. Um, Pretty much where you are ish. Like I want to have access to a place like LA. Like I don't think I'll move to like North Dakota, for example, but um, I've seen myself there for many years. And even when I imagine myself in California, I never imagined myself in a city, if that makes sense. Um, I know that there's a part of me that really enjoys being alone, maybe too much, and kind of isolating myself. And um, yeah, I think I really, there's some hereditary stuff too. Like my grandmother has always lived alone, like my dad has lived alone. I just come from a lot of people who really, like, I don't have a lot of like social butterfly in my blood, if that makes sense. So I think a part of me is less worried, like, oh my God, what about my community and my closeness? Is more like, what if I am so happy there that I don't want to leave and I might lose connections, or what if I lose opportunities? Or so that's really what I'm curious about from a self-centered kind of point of view, is like, how do you maintain your creative connections that allow you to be given opportunities, and also just personal ones, family, friends. Like, how do you stay connected and then feel connected? And then another question off of those five is like, how do you balance all that? Like, how do you balance the desire to be alone and also knowing that there's a part of you that needs connection?
Well, I mean, the balancing of it is like a constant thing. It's just really paying attention to myself. And I think,
Yeah.
a lot of the work I've been doing lately, and I think this is common for a lot of artists, is being able to give just working on self-worth. Like my desires are worthwhile, even if they're not everyone else's forte. If the demands and desires on my time, really I have to check in with myself. And of course, like I love to please people and I love to be successful and I love to achieve things. And that's not the most important thing, and just constantly coming back to that, which is just like a
Mm-hmm.
spiritual work. Um, with so much like video conferencing. I mean, my absolute best friend in life is my youngest sister, and she lives in New Mexico. So it's like a 10-hour drive for me. So she's lived there for 15 years. We've lived apart, and we are closer than ever, and we video each other and we text and we call and like, and we make time to go see each other and sometimes take, little trips together. Um, and it's not impacted us negatively at all. Even though when she left to go there, I was like, no.
Yeah, it's
But
hard.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, you especially know right now. So with your
Yeah.
relationship and also with Morgan, like you guys were you this connected when you lived there?
No, not as much, I wouldn't say. I think there was a shift, but it
Yeah.
happened through the screen.
Yeah, we started doing these weekly meetings in person, but then, of course, with COVID, things shifted to online, even when we were living like, 10 minutes apart. Um, and then, of course, when I moved, it didn't feel like it was so scary, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you're answering your own questions, Kevin. Like you're afraid, but here you've proven to yourself that you do stay connected to the people that are really important to you. And that's really what it's all about. You're not going to lose those people. And if you are afraid of being like, what the word that was popping into my mind was like agoraphobic, like you're scared you're going to just be so happy to stay inside and not really ever leave. But personally, I don't see that happening, because you have these like really deep connections with people in your life who will always be able to help you through those moments of fear, and living in that fear-based kind of situational mindset of this is where I get a little uncomfortable with being alone, where I might be very happy just being alone and that's it. But I mean, I think I struggle with the same fear, because so much goodness comes out of solitude. So much of yourself gets discovered in those moments of alone time. But you also are so good at sharing that, and you're so good at wanting to share it with the world. Even in your work, it comes out through that. Like you said, Arthur, like you can create through that fear. You're kind of like working through that, whether you know it or not.
And the sharing of your art is an actual art form in itself.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're constantly evolving that as our culture evolves into these new ways of sharing. Um,
Mm,
so that to you, you approach that as an artist as well. So it's like
you do.
you're not going to stop sharing your work and sharing yourself.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, I hear a lot of what you guys are saying, and I appreciate it so much. I keep kind of smiling, so I'm like, oh, damn it, like I didn't want the focus to be on me. But it's
We
all
can shift it.
but it's all of value, and I hope people who are listening can get a lot of a lot of what they're curious about through some of the questions I'm asking, even if they are for myself. I totally see value in that. I think one thing too is like sometimes there's a worry that you might not know yourself as well as you think you do, and that's part of the journey, right? Like, we keep talking about listening, like, is this what I actually want, or is it coming from something else entirely? And I think to answer your original question, like I'm actually really good at knowing what I need to do. To be super specific, like I know if I had my own house in the mountains, I know for a fact if X amount of days or weeks go by and I haven't left the mountain or done a thing like a gallery reception or whatever, insert whatever, I know that I would say, okay, it's time. Like I need to do this for
Yes.
my mental health, for whatever. Like I know that I would recognize the importance of finding balance in the enjoyment of being alone, hiking, being in nature, and the kind of mental health benefits of leaving, and also kind of going back to our careers is like the opportunities that come from being physically present
Mhm.
in each of our communities.
Yeah. You're so self-aware.
I think
You're going to
sometimes
be
too
okay.
self-aware, like
Yeah. That can be, a little iffy. But I do have one question for you, Arthur. Um, if I can diverge a little bit back
yes.
to is if there was a time that you didn't listen to yourself a little bit, and like what that was like for you, if you can remember a time where you kind of steered off of your own listening path, and what that might have been like for you.
I mean, there are explorations that I go into that aren't fruitful. So I guess I'll answer it in that way because
Hmm.
there's definitely things that are like, oh, there's a shiny thing. I want to do that. I want to try that. And then I
Yeah.
like start to invest in it, or I'll even like buy stuff that encompasses it because I feel like it's going to be this big thing. And then it
Yeah.
doesn't end up being that thing at all. Um,
Right. Right.
yeah, it's certainly happened. And I mean, I definitely know, and I try to remind myself that failure is good. So I consider those like little failures,
Hmm.
but at the same time, they kind of inform the rest of my life and they still stay with me.
Yeah.
So, like, for instance, now I'm taking this I'm taking a series of clowning workshops from this professional Cirque du Soleil clown, and
What?
yeah,
I'm
she's
listening.
amazing.
Ah,
Um, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but that's exactly the point, is that I just felt this desire. Okay, I need to get outside my normal box. And you talking, Kevin, like I kind of know when I'm unbalanced, and if I'm spending months and months at home, I dive into it because I love diving into things, and I do it until it's done. And then I'm like, well, I have this desire to like go outside of it. So I'm doing this thing. I've invested a good amount of money in it already. I'm actually heading to Maine this summer to do like 5 days straight of 9 hours a day of like clowning. And like, what am I going to do with that? I don't have any plans for it. It's just something that I feel like is a good growth for
I
me.
love
And like, it's just the
it.
experience of it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think it's perfect to do so yes, I have definitely done that. And there's other times where I feel I can't quite understand my own clarity, so I'll just make decisions.
Yeah.
And I have tended to be extremely punishing of myself of those things. And when in reality, like what you said, Kevin, we can just change our mind. We can always make a different decision. And I try to remind myself of that because I want to make the best one.
Yeah.
And you can't always.
Yeah.
You
Like
just,
you're afraid to make a mistake.
yeah. And then it ends up limiting you, or it ends up really affecting your state of being so much that you're struggling even more, as opposed to just being like, well, I'm just going to try this. And like, if I fuck up, well, I fuck up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
doing little practices where you can mess up a little bit more, I think is important.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. I
Okay.
just,
Yeah.
it could have been small, it could have been big, and I love the way you answered that. I often get confused about things like small in my daily routine where I will really want to do like five things. I want to jump in the ocean. I also want to work on the computer. I also want to go down the street and get a smoothie. But I only have like a certain period of time, and I get so confused on what I really want and what's going to be really the best solution for me. And so that's just, those are like really small examples of kind of like, what do I listen to in this moment? And one of the questions that I was given to ask myself in moments like this is waking up, and the first thing that you ask yourself is like, what you want to hear, like, what do I want to hear today? And that could mean like, I want to hear, it could be physical. It could be like, I really actually just want to hear the sound of the birds. I want to hear the sound of the trees blowing in the wind. Or it could be like, I want to hear positivity. I want to hear gratitude. I want to hear other people talk about their stories. It could be anything in that juncture as well. But I've been asking that question to myself the past, I don't know how long, probably like in quarantine during those moments of like, feeling a little lost, or I'm not really knowing how to listen to myself or what's really going on. I'm like, what do I want to hear today? What do I want to like, what do I want to hear today? Because I get to be, like I said earlier, the writer of that. But it gets confusing. So I really appreciate your answer. How you can lean into that confusion as well sometimes. Be like, well, if I do that thing and it's not the thing that I was meant to do, then okay, let's move on and, feel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm honestly someone who even picks my underwear based on how I'm feeling, like down to that level. And like
Yes.
it can get ridiculous if I'm like
I
not
know.
if I'm not understanding. So there's a couple things, like if you're pretty body oriented, you can
Mhm.
always like place your attention on
Mm,
your heart and then
yeah.
make one of the decisions in your mind, feel how it feels in your body to do that. Then make another
Wow.
decision in your mind, feel how it feels in your body to do that, and kind of do it that way. Um,
Ooh,
so
I
that might
love
help.
that. Yes, because
Um,
I'm a huge visual person. I mean, that's how
okay.
I like when I'm ready to do something major. I close my eyes, I imagine myself in that environment, I imagine my surroundings, I imagine how I might feel. And honestly, never really put it together that I can do that in small things in my day. Like, how is it going to feel if I get into my car, drive down the street, go get that smoothie, come back, versus walking down the street, jumping in the water, coming back? And I can really like visualize. It doesn't take long.
Yeah,
Such
exactly.
good advice.
The other thing you could do is treat it like a little fun vision quest and just get in your car and be like, okay, where to next? And then just
Yeah.
go with your immediate, just make the decision. That's also fun because
Mm,
it's kind of an adventure. So, oh, maybe you're headed to the coffee shop, but actually this street looks good. Okay, now I'm at the beach. Or like,
yeah.
that's
Ugh,
always fun to do. And if you're a very imaginative person, I will sometimes start with the intention of, okay, well, first of all, I just intend that I'm connected to my higher self. So I take a deep breath in, I'm connected to my higher self. And then I ask, what will connect me to my passion? And you can say it in any way. You can say, what will connect me most to my satisfaction? What will connect me most to my truth? But lately for me, it's been my passion. And then I just see what here, like look at what comes. And if I have a variety of options, I'll lay those options out in front of me and see which one's brightest or biggest. Or there's just
mm,
like an infinite variety of ways that you can do it. So I think being playful and curious is really a valuable thing, and that might help you because you seem like someone who can do that well, especially since you do know yourself and you are like passionate about finding what is the best thing for yourself to do, you
mhm.
know?
Yeah, like Kevin said, maybe a little too much and then it gets overwhelming. Like there are so many things that could be good for me. There's so many things that could be bad for me.
Well,
And I don't know.
this is the thing. This is like why we're together, because we are three people that are taking moments out of our day to check in about like whether or not we want a smoothie or if we want to wear blue underwear or and
Mhm.
like we're just very, I think, introspective, sensitive, wonderful human beings, and I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah. I
Me
love,
too.
yeah, I love um I know we didn't really get a chance to talk about exactly your path and the things that you've really done, but I think that's kind of the nature of this podcast is really getting to know the other version. And but I what I've really appreciated is this sense of teaching that you have within yourself. It's like it just kind of radiates out of you, like you're teaching us without even knowing that you're teaching us, and it's like so refreshing and nice to
Well,
talk to you. Like you can clearly see that this is something that you've really found a deep relationship with, and honoring that kind of relationship with yourself, and then also like understanding the dedication that like people rely on you too. And I think that you've kind of formed some great identity around both of those things, and I love it. It's so
well,
awesome.
thanks for that reflection. And you know, like it's just spending time with you guys and being able to like share all together is also teaching myself, you know. It's like and I'm just aware of that all the time on how sometimes I think, how could I teach other people when I like still don't know anything? I feel like I don't know anything. And I'm sure we all feel that way,
Yeah,
and that's actually
yeah,
good.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, and hearing a reflection back is really helpful too. It's clarifying. It's like, oh, thank you. I
Mm,
really appreciate that. And I love that the conversation is really organic, and I love the way that you guys are also just thoughtful and ask good questions. And yeah, it's just enjoyable to spend time together. So,
yeah. Aw. Yeah.
Yeah, I did just want to reflect on your reflection and just
Okay.
say, yeah, something that Morgan and I have talked about a few times is like this idea of just radical honesty. And the more I've known it about myself for forever, but I've just kind of started to acknowledge how it affects other people, even in like good ways, but also like sometimes uncomfortable ways. Like I'll literally sign on and be like, Morgan, oh my God, I just have to tell you, like, I just love you so much. Like, I just am very radically honest about how people make me feel. And so that kind of thing about um, reflecting on what you're kind of getting from another person, I think is so important. And like I said, I've always been aware of it, but there's a new there's a new awareness now of like the importance of it, and hearing you Arthur, bring it up again. Like, thank you so much for that reflection of me and your interpretation of me. I think it just reiterates again how wonderful it is.
Yes, and important.
It is important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey, and yeah, I don't know. I was wondering like how this would be after I had a very emotional therapy session this morning. I just went back to therapy after, I don't know, 15 years of not being in therapy.
Mm.
Um, but I've also just been surprised at the layers that keep coming off and things that I thought I had dealt with and cleared out that still are there to a degree. And that's really humbling.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a good thing. It's just surprising to me. Um, so it just brings me back to like humanity and kind of the wonder. I think wonder is a good word, even though it's not as it's a little more colorful than just being wonder, but the wonder of life and the mystery of life. Um, you know, as we're exploring it, and we're all just kind of exploring it together and being, oh, this is what I learned. This is what I learned. Oh, this is what I'm going through now,
Yep.
And that's its own like fun thing, you know.
There's so much to
Yeah.
learn from each other, like I acknowledge that all the time, even if I go into a conversation without that intention, but I leave
Mhm.
feeling like I got so much out of it. It's that's honestly how I feel every time I talk to Morgan, every time I talk to Arthur. So
I'm glad we're all able to be in the same place because Kevin has had so much good things to say about you, Arthur. Constantly, even
Likewise.
like after him visiting you, even back in the day, every time he would come back, he'd be like just kind of beaming with these new self-awarenesses. And he always knew that you were like going to be this like great guide and wonderful kind of just collaborator in life, which as I like to say. So it's just really nice that we're all able to have this conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time because I know like time is so precious to
yeah,
us artists and creators and of all sorts. And I know you get to stay at this like really nice oasis at this time. And I really hope you enjoy the rest of it.
Arthur, thank you so much for sharing and being with us today. I really appreciate it.
Such a pleasure. I
Yes.
hope to be able to do it again at some point.
We will be asking you back next week. No, I'm kidding, but soon.
And thank you guys for doing what you do. I really appreciate that. So
No,
it's been lovely.
Where can people find you?
thanks.
They can find me on my website, theartofbodyandsoul.com, and also on Instagram, Arthur Moves. Yeah, either of those places. It's very easy to contact me that way.
Oh, great.
Great.
Yay.
Thank
Well,
you
thank
so
you
much
very
again.
much.
Thank you
And we'll
guys.
talk soon. Okay.
Okay, have a wonderful day.
Thanks, you
Bye.
too. Bye.
Bye. Hey,
Whoa,
Yeah.
where are you?
I'm house sitting for my former coach. So it's a
Oh,
beautiful,
fun.
cool
Wow.
area. Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's like, wow, that is not the
Okay.
mountain.
I'm gonna I'm buying a plane ticket right now. I'll be there
Yes, come visit.
shortly. That's amazing. How long are you there?
I'm just here for a few more days.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, I'm also managing his business while he's gone right now. He's literally at World Championships right now. So a lot of my athletes I've been working with are all there competing right now. So it's a
And
very,
that's gymnast just
it's called
what kind
acrobatic
of
gymnastics,
okay.
and it's a discipline. It's in USA Gymnastics. It's one of their disciplines. And that's the discipline that I did, and that's the discipline that I work with a lot. I also work with recreational acrobats and professional acrobats, but
Wow.
my like first love is this sport, and it's such a beautiful, I
Mm,
mean, it's an incredible sport, um, and very, very hard, and all about relationships, because
mhm.
it's literally just people with people making insane looking things happen together with nothing else than
With their
themselves.
bodies.
Yeah,
Right.
It's
and
so beautiful.
I often, talk about that when I'm talking with the people about the beauty of it is that I mean, it's such an incredible learning instrument for dealing with your own emotions, dealing with other people, having patience, being responsible with other people, because you have to be responsible with their life, also trusting other people. I mean, it's, you know, I don't know of very many things where you can be upset with someone and have to save their life in the same moment. And like,
Wow.
such a strange paradox, and it toughens you in this way and enlarges you in this way that's so beautiful. Um, and so I think that's probably one of my favorite things about it, aside from
Wow.
just being visually stunning. But um, yeah, sometimes it'd be like, oh, I gotta hate you to my partner, and I gotta catch you because you're gonna die.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
I love that.
Yeah, but yeah. I hope that we
Wow.
can all do that in our relationships, just make room for people that, frustrate us and just make room for it. It's okay. Um,
Hmm.
there was a woman that came into the business I was, managing for my coach the other day, yesterday, in fact, and she was very, very opinionated about, she just started this rant about politics and
Oh
socialism and
no.
Marxism and I mean, like anti-masker and like all this stuff. And I had to kind of contain that conversation because we're in this business, but at the same time, she was just, and I couldn't help but say some things back to it. And then eventually I was like, you know what? I just really appreciate this interaction. And I appreciate you as a person. And regardless of your opinions and like, I appreciate the fact that you're so passionate and like thanks for sharing that with me. And like, it was just nice to have that realization in the moment where I started to be like, okay.
Yeah. Oh, it is such a shift in mindset when you're able to like give whatever it is gratitude still, even if it's pulling at the wrong string. And having that realization in the moment is why
Yeah.
you're speaking about it right now, is because it really struck a chord for you. So thanks for sharing that. I'm going to
Yeah.
practice more of that
Me too.
when something like that happens. So thanks.